Isn't it funny how sometimes when we're given the most restrictions, we get the most creative? I mean, feel free to tag me an Instagram post or something if you're listening to back me up here so I don't feel alone. But if I'm given the metaphorical, or for many of us makers, quite literal blank canvas and told to do anything at all, I absolutely freeze. But if you give me some parameters, some limitations, some things I can or cannot do, well, then my brain is going to start problem solving. And problem solving, in some of the most extreme ways, is exactly what today's guest clearly has excelled at. Let me give you an example. When you think of ceramics, do you think of it as a particularly mobile craft? Like one you can just easily pack up and move around the country or even the world. Simple, right? I mean, maybe for any oil painters who are listening, but for any of you potters listening, I'm thinking I just gave you hives at the thought of the logistics to pack up a kiln, a wheel, and all of the rest of the supplies that go with this rather heavy, literally heavy craft. And I bet when you think about getting a master's degree in ceramics, you also assume that you'll need to move to wherever the campus of your school is located, right? I mean, that was my assumption, at least before I sat down with Dell of D Goode Art. As a soldier and a potter, he's navigated all of these quote unquote restrictions and wound up with not only a master's degree in ceramics, but a style so unique it jumps out at you amidst the mind numbing scroll of Instagram. Oh, and he's also created his own exhibition, got a partnership with Speedball, and is showing in galleries. So, yeah, you're going to want to be sure to listen all the way to the end on this one. But enough from me about it. Let's dig in with Del. Hey, Del, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how's it going?
It is going great. I'm glad that we finally made this happen. I feel like you've been so patient with me and schedules and time zones and all the things. But
Right.
for people who don't know who I'm talking to, who are you? How would you introduce yourself?
My name is Dell, or Delvin Good. I am a ceramic artist and as well as a soldier. Yeah, I think that's pretty much sums it up.
I just learned the latter part from your Instagram post like this week, also, admittedly.
Nice.
I don't know if I was living under a rock prior to that point or what. Like, I knew you had another job, but I didn't know what job you had.
No, I don't post a lot about it on social media. I'll admit that. But it is in my description though, in my bio. It's the first thing I list on there.
I mean, let's be honest, we're all just going to stories all the time. Come on.
True, true.
Well, where in the country are you guys, or the world for that matter?
Currently in Arizona.
All right. Now, the elephant in the room when I do think about the military, and then when I think about ceramics, when it comes to an art form, that is not an easily mobile choice as far
Right.
as having a job that occasionally you have no choice but to move.
Right. It's about every 2 years. We're gonna be a total of 4 here in Arizona, so that's a treat. That's a treat for us.
I was going to say, I have enough family history with it where I'm going, okay, so are you packing up a kiln and clay, and every couple of years we're just picking up and moving a whole ceramic studio? Because that's also a very unique real estate search.
Yes. So that's it. I have a kiln, I have my wheels, and that's what we do. Every time we get to move, it's like, all right, we carry those ourselves. We don't let the movers take
Yep.
that equipment.
Yep.
I did it my very first move when I was in the Army. I had them ship my pottery wheel, and somebody somewhere, and it wasn't the Army because the Army just hires out contractors, but somebody in that contracting business understood exactly what that was and took my motor off.
Oh,
I was like, oh.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say, like, took good care of it.
Oh, they took the
Oh,
motor. But, hey, I'm a glass half full kinda guy. I ordered a new motor, but didn't have to pay for it myself, and I learned how to fix the pottery wheel.
which
So,
is
there
helpful.
we go. And I still have that wheel. That was about 15 years ago.
And frankly, if something's gonna go out on a wheel, it's gonna be I mean, it's not like you really need a new wheel head if you're taking care of it, so it's like buying a brand new wheel.
Yeah, I was like, "Well, they knew just to take the motor and everything else would be nobody would notice except for the owner of the wheel."
There you go.
So,
There
yeah.
you go. Alright. Well, yeah, we'll move on from that. I was
Okay.
um, but thinking from the pottery perspective, though, has knowing that you're gonna move every couple of years had an impact on what you choose to make and how you make it and that process? Because it's not like obviously having a studio at home versus a community studio, but a lot of other things. I don't know.
Yeah, 100%. I already came up when I started doing pottery, doing functional wear.
Okay.
And when I was lucky enough to be able to find a ceramics, master of ceramics program that I could join and not have to be present in university, but I still had to produce a good amount of work. I think the functional wear just fit right in there. So it's like instead of doing like large vases and pieces like that, okay, what can I make that still will advance me as an artist and still be impactful and still show the university that I actually am still progressing on my own as an artist and trying new things out. And it was like, hey, functional wear, mugs, cups, bowls,
Yep.
you already love it. So just focus on that and just develop your style in that genre, at least while you're in the master's
Multiple questions that come from that. The first thing I think of is it's a good thing you didn't love wood firing.
program. Yeah, yeah, that would have been interesting. The last couple of houses we've lived in. Yeah,
That is, if you've ever also lived on base, that would get real problematic real fast, I
yeah,
think.
instantly. Yeah, and that's a good point too. We haven't. I don't live on the military installations because of. I know I have my kiln. I got to install it. They're not too keen on that. So,
Yeah, they don't really like it if you start changing electrical from what I've
yeah,
learned from my cousin. But with that also, I'm fascinated by what master's program and have you already finished?
I graduated last summer, actually.
So you are a master of ceramics. That's what no, I'm
Master of
kidding.
ceramics. So, it was a crawl, walk, run kind of thing. I
Sure.
started it in 2015.
First ever started or that's when you started the master's program?
First started the master's program
Okay, okay.
in 2015. It was at Fort Hays State University in Kansas. It was pretty cool to be able to find a program that fit that because I didn't know one existed. And I literally was at my desk because I reached a point in my career where they were like, hey, if you don't have a master's, it's going to affect you going forward, being promoted and things of that nature.
Didn't matter what masters.
No, they don't. No, the army doesn't care. Just get you a master's, right? And so
We're
with
not
that,
gonna talk about that. Okay.
yeah, yeah, but with that, there's a tremendous amount of programs out there to help soldiers just do that. And I was like, well, if I'm gonna go for it, let me get it in art. Let me just see. And I was like, I'm gonna spend 30 minutes making phone calls and
Yeah,
see if I can find a program out there that'll let me do it.
yeah.
And I was in Leavenworth, Kansas at the time. And so I started calling Kansas schools because I was like, I'm here for a year. Maybe there's a university I can at least drive to on the weekends or something and at least kickstart the program.
Yep.
And so I called, I believe it was uh, K State first. So I called Kansas State first. And professor, I told him what I wanted to do. He kind of laughed. And then he said, but he was like, why don't you give Linda Ganstrom at Fort Hays State University a call? I think she's starting a program that might work out for you. And literally the second phone call I made, she picked up the phone and I told her, hey, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm thinking. And I'd been out of ceramics, I think for like 15 years at that point.
All right.
And I was like, but I want to get my master's in ceramics if I'm going to get a master's in art. And she was like, yeah, we have a low residency program. Let's try it out. And that was 2015 and graduated last year. So credit at a time, making it,
Hey,
making it happen.
whatever works, right? No shame in that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was awesome to be able to find that type of program and
Let
still get
alone on
there.
the second phone call. I mean, shit.
Yeah, meant to be type stuff.
This is the type of conversation that keeps happening. And it's so fascinating to me when I ask people to be on the podcast, I don't have like a big story arc of, okay, I'm going to ask these three people. These stories are going to connect to one another. No, no, no. I'm just looking at people's stuff on Instagram and saying, oh, that person seems cool to talk to. And yet there's these through lines. And I just got off a call with Adam saying, like, how much stuff just works out. I'm the person who feels the need to try to control it all, to figure it out, to take the clock apart and see how it works so that I can put it back together again and make 20 more. But it just works.
Yeah, it's been great. This is not beyond what I ever thought the program would be, beyond whatever I thought the art I'd be doing right now
Yeah.
versus when I started the program. Like it's been crazy.
So what were you doing when you started then?
So when I first started, I just kind of went back to just bowls and just trying to like cups and bowls and just trying to get the form back. Can I at least do the basics correctly to get into the program? And it was last time I was doing pottery. We might get into the story
I
later.
was going to
15 years
ask. So
back.
go ahead. Get into the
Um,
story. Go.
no, it was. I was teaching at Florida State University actually the last one when I was doing pottery as like not an accredited course. It was at the student union, so you could come after class and take my classes.
I was like,
And
how did you find a college that would let you teach without a master's first? Because like these are all like
okay, we gotta rewind it back again. Okay,
yep. I'm like,
so
you found all the loopholes I've been spending the last 2 years trying to find. Like I've
so
unlocked the keys to the kingdom here.
So we're, real funny, kind of story. So I was a graphic design undergrad, which makes sense in my work now, but I was a graphic design undergrad and I got to a point where I had taken all the classes that I needed to get the degree, but now it's time to take your electives. And I was like, if I'm going to take the electives, I want to be where the ladies are. And, and somebody suggested wheel throwing because it was next to the girls' dormitory. Right.
Oh, not because the girls were in wheel throwing.
No, no, because it was that close to the dormitory, they took a lot of those classes. So they was like, you won't be able to get in. It's always the girls. You won't get in. And but it was an automated registration. So I just kept hitting enter for like 30 minutes until it finally let me in. And I'm watching TV or whatever. I'm not even paying attention. Like my finger is just on
Right.
repeat. And I got in the course. And yeah, it was true to form. Like it was me and another guy. And all the rest were girls, like 18 girls in the class. And he quit after the first weekend. So, I was like, hey, it's me and 18 other girls. This is great. And
Please tell me this is where you met your wife because it would just be way too good.
no, that story is even better.
All
But
right. Fine.
but but we started, when I grew up an artist, I grew up in an artist household.
Okay.
So I grew up drawing and painting and excelling, always being like top one or two in the class, no issues. And so I was like, yeah, this is another art form, whatever. Let's go. And I absolutely sucked at it. I still tell people when I used to teach it, I was like, no, I've never met a student worse than I was in ceramics.
Maybe you were just distracted. I don't know.
It could have been, but the type A guy in me, because the first class was like, okay, you got to wedge. If you can't wedge a proper ball of clay, you can't get on the wheel. And I couldn't do it in 3 hours. It was like, you're not allowed on the wheel. So the next class, I finally finished wedging. And then it was like, okay, you got to learn how to center. You're not allowed to open it until you learn how to center. Couldn't center in 3 hours. 3 hours time, I couldn't figure out how to center. And so I was in the back of the class, like literally in the back of the class, just sucking on the wheel, being made fun of. And finally, there was this girl. She was all about 4'5", maybe 5 feet tall. And she sat across from me and she slapped like 20 pounds of clay on the wheel and just owned it and made this beautiful vase. And I'm sitting here like, okay, I cannot be the worst person in this class. So I went operation learn this thing like now. So I spent a lot of my time in that ceramics lab. So I'd finish up my classes, go to ceramics lab, go home, get something to eat, come back to the lab, go home for dinner, change for the club, go to the lab before the club, go clubbing, come back from the club, trim all my pieces.
That is a
Yeah.
dangerous choice.
Oh,
Just
oh yeah. And then I did that for the rest of that semester. I'm just trying to get better at ceramics. So I just didn't suck at it so bad. But one day I was just in the lab doing that same routine, finishing up some pieces. And one of the instructors approached me and asked if I wanted to start teaching at the student union
so
for,
you clearly got a little bit better.
They got well, funny, I think it was they just noticed I was good at the basics. Like,
Mm.
you're good at the basics, and I would help people in class. So they're like, okay, you're good at teaching the basics. You clearly don't have a problem talking to anybody. So, so I ended up teaching the basics. But funny enough, it was like, okay, now that I'm teaching, and me, 20, 22-year old, 21-year old at the time, I was like, well, I guess I've peaked as a ceramicist. I've knocked this art form out. No need to do anything else, you know?
Yeah.
So I didn't do any pottery really after I graduated, and joined the army shortly after that when I wanted to, we call it 9/11 babies. So I went in after 9/11.
Hmm.
And but I did buy a pottery wheel with my first tax return, and that's the pottery wheel that we talked about earlier, where they somebody stole my motor. And so when it came time to fast forward time to get the master's degree, when they're like, "Hey, get a master's," and like I said, I've been doing painting and woodworking all that entire time,
Okay.
just different artwork and commission artwork for military or just different customers, people, whatever. And 15 years later, you mature a little bit, and I realized that I didn't give ceramics its due diligence. So that's why I wanted ceramics as my master's. I was like, hey, I'm pretty confident as a painter. I'm pretty confident as an illustrator, a graphic designer, photographer. But I was like, ceramics, not confident at all. So let's go for the masters in ceramics and let's give it the proper go versus what I did years ago.
I just got this visual of you running into that girl from class again and being like, all right, toe to toe, let's go.
Well, if I ran into her today with my mentality now, I'd have a pen and paper and be like, all right, teach me what you've learned in the past 15, 20 years. Like I need to continue to learn from you because you started this all. So.
Yeah, it's your fault. Okay, I don't want to get too in the weeds on the master's program and that what that was like, but I am fascinated as far as how you feel like that has developed over this course of time. With now that you've said you've got a background in graphic design, I'm like, oh, duh, of course you do. Like that's obvious. But was that crossover there to begin with, or did that really come out of the master's program?
Crossover wasn't there to begin with. It was really, you kind of look at what the criteria of the curriculum was, and it was ceramics. Like, hey, when you turn in your work, it needs to be 90% ceramic based. Mixed media was like, okay, but it wasn't like heavily encouraged because you're getting a master's in ceramics. And so I've always been big on any of my paintings or anything I've done in the past. Like, color to me is like, that's it. It's got to be as colorful as possible. And again, moving, not having the supplies that I know I'm going to have. You never know what kind of studio access I'm going to have. So I was trying to find the cheapest way, the most expeditious way, if you will, to put color in my ceramics with the limited supplies that I had. So I was using like white earthenwares or porcelains and mixing mason stains and playing around with different spots of color and doing the swirlware, agate ware type pieces, but it still wasn't quite, hitting the heart. It's like I'm moving along in the course, but I'm still doing commission artwork and paintings and stuff on the side. And I was like, man, if I could just get my ceramics to look like my paintings or the cornhole boards or bag toss wherever you're at in the country, doing custom water bottles for people because water bottles became a big thing a couple of years ago. We got to stay
Yep.
hydrated, so I'm customizing water bottles and I'm using vinyl and vinyl cutters and stencils and all this stuff on everything else but my ceramics. And I played with it a couple of times, but it just wasn't successful. And it was towards the end, like it was like I think 2020, the beginning of 2020, when I was like, I'm gonna really seriously try. Actually, it was the end of 2019. That's what it was. So it was the end of the semester, and I was like, I am going to try to seriously make my ceramics look like everything else I do. With the heavy on the graphics, starts in the computer, designing the stencils, and then put it on there. But I also had to wait until my ceramic skills caught up with my other skills because my forms weren't right to complement the graphics. So now I felt like in 2019, I was finally there. So now let's try to crack this code. And I'd also started messing with underglazes at the time. And so once I realized actually how to use underglazes, because I'd always been scared of them, I just didn't understand them. And I was able to figure it out over a couple of assignments. And then I think that's the moment when D Goode Art started.
It now is such a recognizable, somebody else shares a photo of one of your pieces and I'm like, wait, whose account is this? Because that's not their like that. I know whose that is.
Awesome,
Yeah.
man. Thank you. Thank you.
Here's the elephant in the room. How do you manage balancing all of this? Because I think your profession is a great example and a great example of how much everybody has excuses, right? Around or the worry around like, oh, I don't have enough time. I really want to do this, but when truly you have given of yourself in the biggest possible way in this country you can and have no control over your life
Yeah.
schedule or oftentimes where you live, and yet you're making it work.
Well, I think a couple of jobs ago, my job was, we call it aide de camp. So it was an assistant to the general, basically. So I followed the general
It's
around,
kind of
made
big deal
sure.
just for people who don't know. That's a big
so
deal.
so I was the guy behind him, following him around, making sure. I always like to tell people I made sure he focused on what he felt like focusing on. If he's
Sure.
focused on something else, I failed my job, right?
Please
So
tell me you
with
had a clipboard. I just need the
no,
visual.
no, didn't have the clipboard. I was on my phone a lot. In that particular year, we ended up flying quite a bit, like at least 4 times a week. We were on a plane going somewhere, and so it was. So knowing I was going to be flying most of the time, about 4 to 6 hours a day. When I was home, or I was like, I need to be real strategic once I get into the studio. Like I got to maximize my time in the studio. I don't have time to play around. So I bought a sketchbook, and I was like, let me give me a couple of cool little markers and some pens, and I started drawing ideas and mugs and things in that sketchbook as we're flying around. And so that's how I kind of sped up my studio time. Is I was flying with my studio basically. I took it with me. So I would draw things, I try new designs out, realized the idea in my head wasn't going to work because I drew it. And I was like, okay, that's not going to work. Okay, cool. Erase that. Or draw something else and color it. Like, oh, that color scheme doesn't work, and okay, now I know when I actually really go make this in the studio to color it a different, glaze it a different way. And then I hit the studio, make some things, make some more mistakes or some successes, whatever, go back and update that sketchbook, and we're off again, flying again, off again. So I think, not for me, not sketching in the studio as some people do. Like they'll sketch while they're on the wheel, like that's their time. But I say, well, I didn't have the time to do that. When I hit the studio, it is, hey, I got this assignment due. I said I was going to produce 12 mugs with this type of design. I need to be able to hit the ground running, do my 12, and get out the studio, go to sleep, get ready to go jump on a plane the next day, or follow the boss around. And I also, like any university, you get your curriculum, you get the syllabus of the first day of the semester. So I would plan out the entire semester and be like, okay, well, I need to go ahead and do all of this now. Like I need to get all these projects done. I need to have the bisque fired at this time. I need to have the glaze firing at this time, and leave that wiggle room for contingencies. And another beauty of it is that all the faculty at Fort Hays State were just awesome. Like I was just up front. Hey, I'm a soldier. This stuff happens. I will always let you know where I'm at. If I leave the house, you will know. And they were great with it. They were like, yeah, we got you. Just let us know if you need anything else. Here's your assignments. And yeah, it was great.
You just validated my underlife, not underlife, my undergrad self so much because I was the nerd who would get the syllabus and be like, oh, okay. So based upon this and based upon what I want to do in my personal schedule, I'm going to do XYZ super early and blah, blah, blah. And people looked at me like I was crazy. So thank you. 20-year-old Rebecca feels seen.
Yeah, yeah, you are seen. Yeah, yeah. I had no choice.
With graphic design, there was always this crunch at the end of the semester or the end of an assignment where there was probably a couple printers. But depending on what size you needed to print at, depending
Yeah,
on what medium you were printing on, whatever, there was probably only going to be one. And so when you had a class of 25 and 20 of them were all trying to print at
yeah,
8 p.m. the night before the assignments due and the studio closes at 9, I'm sitting in
yeah,
the back doing the next assignment going, you guys knew this was due. Like, what's this? What's going on?
yeah. I was actually literally sitting in the studio, and I was in my first day of my 4-day time off. And I got a call and said, hey, pack your stuff. You're going to North Carolina. Hurricane Florence just hit. And I was like, okay, well, when am I coming back? We don't know. So it's like, hey, okay. So I wrote all my professors like, hey, I'll be out of the loop for probably a month or so. But we did it. But I think I was in art history at the time. So I had my laptop So I was taking care of art history stuff. I was ahead of schedule on ceramics. So I was good on ceramics. It was just like, okay, I can probably wait a little bit to do the glazing. But so yeah, so like front loading everything because I knew it was like you just never know, what was gonna happen. But I had that sketchbook. It was funny enough, eventually the boss would when I finished drawing something, he'd like hand me that. And he would give me his critique, and then he'd hand it back to me. So I had somebody to critique my sketches at least while we flew around. So that helped. But yeah, yeah.
Nice, nice. It's also a reminder to me, though, also of when you want something bad enough, you figure out a way to make it happen. Like, it's one of those conversations I find myself trying to very gently have with people pretty frequently who are asking, like, how do you make it work? How do what about this or about that? And it's like at some point, depending on how uncomfortable you're willing to get, is a sign of how badly you really want it, I guess.
And full disclosure, it wasn't like I was a super soldier the entire time getting this master's. Like I tried to leave the program. I 100% tried to leave it at one point. I think I was like 3 semesters in or something, and just work just got a little crazy. Is actually how my logo came about. Actually, but it was a rough time. It was a rough time, and I was like, I cannot do this because I promised myself when I started a degree that I wasn't gonna just do enough for the A like I focused on in my undergrad. I'll just do enough to get the A. And I told Linda from the start, I will never do that with this program. Like I will push myself every single assignment. And in that particular time, I was like, I can't give this 100%. So if I can't give this each assignment 100% and my focus, I'm just not going to just start doing what I got to do to get the A again. So I told her, I was like, hey, I'm just going to drop the program. And I think I did for one semester. And she reached out to me the next semester afterwards and was like, hey, what do you think? And I was like, nah, I'll just do it when I leave the Army. It's just art. I can get back into art later on. But I'm still doing other art, just not ceramics. And she was like, just take one semester. Just take one credit, one credit. That's all she said, 1 credit hour a semester.
Just
And,
to
and,
keep yourself
and
enrolled, basically.
just keep yourself enrolled, keep yourself in the game. You know what 1 credit hour requires of you for assignments. You can knock out at least that much work. Just keep rolling. And so I did it that semester. I was like, okay, I'm rolling in, 1 credit hour. And I still did enough for like 4 or 5 credit hours worth of art. And I was like, okay, let's not do that again. But I appreciate that she wouldn't let me go. She gave me that semester to relax and just saw a bit, but she didn't let me go. She was like, hey, get back in the program. Let's go. And so I needed that. And so forever grateful for that. And here we are.
And I feel like you just mentioned the elephant in the room. You said, when I get out of the Army. So is the long-term goal, dream to be full-time artist extraordinaire?
Yes, that is definitely the goal. And I know, like I said, in previous people you spoke to in the podcast, I'm one of those who decided to use my career, my day-to-day job to fund what I do. Have hitting the 20-year mark and knowing I have that retirement now, hey, that's really cool. Now we're trying to figure out, okay, what rank do I want to retire as before I walk away? Kind of thing, because it changes your retirement. Just to be there, be at this spot right now. Like I didn't expect it. Like 100% didn't expect to be where I'm at right now. And it was like, and we could talk about what kind of, in my opinion, changed things to where D Goode Art is where it's at today.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but it's just been a crazy ride, but we'll see what happens. I think we're obviously at 20 years, you're at the end, you're on the back end of your career. And now it's
You're
just
not
been
that
that.
old, though.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I appreciate it.
I'm trying to do the math here. I'm thinking, okay, to 9/11, that was, I'm like, eh, something's not adding up here. Either I need to know your workout regimen or I don't know what's going on.
I'm Army old. How about that? I'm Army old.
Well, that's a different,
So,
that's fair.
so,
I'm
so
like,
it's one of those. Okay, we know we're on the back end. Let's start looking at both ways. I'm still doing pretty well, but you should be able to read the tea leaves. The military is one of the few jobs on the planet that'll fire you like 4 or 5 years out. If you understand your career timeline, you got 4 to 5 years before they tell you to go do something else. So
they give you some preparatory time to.
yeah, yeah. So I've had a few prep messages. I'm like, okay, we're about 3, 5 years out. Yeah, okay, we can do this. So let's make this plan. Let's focus a little bit more on the D Goode Art side. Let's give it a little bit more attention and just see what happens when we walk out the door.
So you mentioned like that we could talk about it. And as soon as you said that, I'm like, yes, please, let's dig in on what has shifted, what has pivoted to make it what it is now. Do you feel like?
So again, so now I'm at the point where I took all the ceramics courses that I needed to take to get
Mhm.
my degree. So
Mhm.
now it's like, hey, you need to take something else. So it's the same narrative, but this time I wasn't like, "Hey, okay, I need the ladies again because I'm a married man now. I got 2 boys. I don't care about that." And I was like, okay, what do other people do? But I
And
like,
heaven forbid you just set back a little bit and enjoy a Sunday.
no, no. It was like, okay, it was what, but we also had to find additional programs in the art curriculum that were virtual as well as the ceramics. So she suggested that I take marketing. And I was like, okay, I'll take some marketing classes. And I was like, oh, and so I took visual media marketing, which I absolutely love that course. But it started changing that started changing what I did on Instagram as far as
Mhm.
my pictures and photos and things like that. And it was just trying it out. And I was like, okay, let's do this, let's do that. That's when I started the videos in visual media marketing. I had never done the videos before. I use the Adobe Suite. I've been paying for it for years, just never used anything besides Photoshop, Illustrator, and Lightroom.
Tell
But then
me
I
you're
was like,
getting the Adobe Suite at least at the Army discount and not the civilian rate. Like, I hope you're
well,
getting.
I was getting it at the student discount,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
I was in course, so I was like student discount,
You
and
hold on to that as long as you can. That was
oh
the
yeah, oh yeah,
biggest
what
to graduate and then be slapped with, like, you just graduated, so now you have all this debt and you don't have a job yet, and now you have to pay full price for things? What?
yeah, that's yeah, especially when they switched to the subscription style. It could be a little rough, but it was cool to start using what I learned from visual media marketing and start implementing it on Instagram.
Mhm.
And then I took the next class, social media marketing, right after visual media.
I would like to just I know I'm interrupting you a lot, and I'm gonna stop doing
Oh,
that,
you're
but
good. You're good.
for my brain to wrap around the fact like, when I think about the type of classes I took in art school 15 years ago, and to have there be a class now that is purely dedicated to social media marketing, I understand why there is, obviously, but still is a weird I'm having, like, one of those, like, grandparent moments where it's like, "Well, when I was in school" like, what? You can get credits for that? Like, we were just over there with our EDU emails signing up for Facebook.
Oh yeah, it was a mind blowing class. Like it was like wow, and I was like, okay, like at the visual media marketing, I'm learning the social media marketing. I was like, let me just. I have a full time job. I'm good. Art is not keeping my lights on. I'm still in this thing for another 3 to 5 years or whatever. I'm just going to start playing around with stuff. Some of the things that I've learned to do as a treat myself as a social media marketer. So I was like, okay, the D Goode Art logo. Like it was actually from a series of work I did, and I called it the Moody Face. But it slowly started becoming my logo. And I was like, okay, that's my logo. That's going to be D Goode Art. Now, how can I make people see that logo and see D Goode Art and recognize it and build the brand? Like, how can I start building the brand? And I started, like I said, I changed my photos. I started doing more quality photography, and just having fun with my Photoshop background and my graphic design background and just playing with different things. And then also started engaging, like not engaging for the sake of just, oh, let me just play the game so I can get people to start liking me and all that stuff. It was just, I was like, you know what? These classes are right. It doesn't cost me anything to give somebody a like or to say nice job on their post.
Especially when you mean it.
Yeah, I was just like, yeah, I actually really do like your stuff. Like,
Yeah.
that's really cool. Like, I throw likes out all the time on this. I'll throw likes out on everything just because it's like, hey, why not? Like, I liked it. It made me smile. Why do I keep scrolling? Let me scroll. I do that a lot. Let me scroll back up. That actually made me smile. Let me give them a like, and let them know somebody out there appreciated it. But
I
it
think
said
all
that.
of us are looking at that for ourselves. It's
Yeah.
funny when you think about it that that's what we're all checking our accounts for,
Yeah.
and yet we don't think about doing that in return as consciously. So that's yeah.
Yeah. So and I know people look like, man, he likes everything. But yeah, well, I do. I like a lot of stuff. If you're a beginning potter and I like your stuff, it's because I remember when I was a beginning potter and I was at that stage, like, hey, good on you for getting to that point. And so then, like I said, I started like making little comments. Hey, I'll actually take the time to say something about what I think. And then, funny enough, I had made the decision to start using like speedball products because I was getting frustrated with just some of the results I was getting out of the glaze firing because I like to mix and match mixed media. So painting and all this stuff, I need that ceramic piece to come out a certain way. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try speedball before my next series. And I think this was like, yeah, this is the end of 19. I was like, I'm gonna start trying speedball for 2020 semester. I'm gonna do speedball stuff. And they had made a post about the new colors coming out. I mean, I'm the color guy. I was like, Went on that thing, like, yeah, excited about this, you know? And next thing they reached out and was like, hey, we kind of like what you got going on. What do you think about doing some kind of partnership? I was like, mind blown. Like, what? Speedball? Oh, man. Like, my wheels are speedball. I just said I was going to switch to you guys. This is great. So we just kind of chatted back and forth. And so now that's where we're at. But I totally tie that back to visual media marketing.
Mhm.
And I was like, hey, at least on this, let's upgrade my photos. Let's try a little bit harder on these photos. Not incredibly hard, just a little bit better on the photos. Be a little more conscious about it, and just interact with people online, you know. And it's like, wow, like the relationships and the partnerships I've got now based off of that, it's been amazing. But it was just taking those little tips and tricks. And I was talking to my buddy John from John All Hamilton the Third Ceramics today, and I was like, man, I'm still only using 10% of what I learned in those marketing classes. Like I haven't even gone full bore yet because I'm still a soldier, because I still have to take care of the other stuff and hang out with my family, spend time with them. So it's like, all right, let's just do little bits here and there what we can, continue to build the brand, continue to, you know, show people what it is, what D Goode Art is, what my art is, what I'm trying to convey with my art when you get one of my pieces. Like I can still do that. I can still take time to do that and then
Yeah.
not take away from my other responsibilities.
I would also like to just bring it back and put a bigger sign, audible sign on the fact that you kind of glossed over what sounds like a pretty official partnership with Speedball.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just to pause for a second and say
Okay.
congrats. And like
Thank you.
that's a big deal. And I love how uncomfortable it visually makes you right now. You're like squirming in your seat and but
Yeah.
that's huge. I mean, I don't know how many people would also understand what that means and what that looks like as far as the impact on your business and just, yeah, I don't know.
Well, you know, it was one of those like, if you guys believe in me enough to reach out like this, like I'm gonna put that same enthusiasm back in you.
Mm.
And I'm gonna show people 100%. This is what I do with people, and I'm gonna push it to the limit. Like I'm gonna slap you in the face with color every time I do something with these videos. I'm gonna give them a shout out, like because it is a partnership. If they're gonna send supplies and stuff to me ever so often, yeah, I'm gonna use them and I'm gonna show people because I truly do believe in the product. And so it's so the opportunities are like you said are like continuously growing, and there's a couple of them lined up next month that's still mind blowing to me. Like, all right, hey, let's go, let's do it. This is a lot of fun, you know. And you know, like I said, I truly appreciate what they did for me because you know, that was a big confidence boost too. When you're like trying to like, hey, am I on the right path? But this is all right around the time where I changed my whole entire not because like I said, I was trying to make my ceramics look like my paintings. So it was all right around that time where I found like my voice, if you will, or I found my style. And then they latched on, was like, hey, we like what you're doing. And it was full of color and all that stuff. And like I said, changing the pictures. It's like, yeah. So I think they saw, hey, here's somebody who can help, you know, us and we can help them. And like I said, it's just continuing to grow as we go along.
That's amazing. I think the thing too, because I can hear people asking, how do you get partnerships? How do I do that? And what I'm hearing is it's not like you were creating the content going after it. Like it happened organically because you were just putting out into the world what you would have been putting out into the world anyway,
Yes.
you know?
Yes. And that was, you know, the same thing with the galleries that I'm storing work in right now. Like it was because I reached out to a gallery maybe 2.5 years ago or so and sent them my stuff and sent them some pictures. I was like, hey, you're one of my favorite galleries. Like, what do you think? You know, this is kind of what I'm working on right now. And they were like, hey, you know, we appreciate you reaching out. And I can't remember the eaches of it, but I remember like, and they said no, but it wasn't like a no in a demeaning kind of like you suck kind of way. It was, hey, keep pushing. Like it was an encouraging no. We like where you're going. Keep pushing it. We'll keep an eye on you. And I was like, okay, all right, cool. And then kind of stepping back and looking at it, it was like, okay, all right, it still really isn't my voice yet. That was before I started doing the graphics really heavy on my work. And I was like, okay, all right, well, let me come back, reel it back and get back in the studio. And then, like I said, like after the speedball thing started, and then the gallery started reaching out. Okay, we kind of like what you're doing, you know, we like your stuff. And it's helping me out right now because I don't really have the time because that's one of those things you got to give up something. I don't really have the time to because I have an Etsy shop, but I haven't loaded anything on it
This was
in like
literally my next
2 years,
question.
you know?
How in the world are you keep going? Yep.
Yeah, so I don't have it. So right now, I kind of throw stuff at the galleries. Like if they reach out, I'm like, oh, yeah, cool, because that's pretty awesome too. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I mean, I really love all the galleries I'm in right now. I peruse them all the time, buy stuff from them all the time, because there's some amazing artists in there. And it's like, yeah, I'll help support you guys too. You supporting me. So, and like I said, none of the stuff I expected, and it just kind of came, naturally. But I think it's, because I see people every now and again, they'll get rejected from a show or something like that, and it's like, well, don't look at it as such a bad thing. Take it with a grain of salt and just go back to the studio, recage. Not everybody's gonna like everything.
And also,
Yeah.
some of the times, I think what a lot of people don't know, some of the times it has nothing to do with your work. Some of the times it's that, oh, the gallery literally just accepted a wood fire potter, and so they can't have another way. I get this all the time with it's kind of a bad metaphor, but publishing weddings for magazines and stuff like that. It's like I can have a beautiful piece. I had a wedding that was literally, I had an editor be like, this is gold. Like, this is, you have to send me this wedding. The wedding hadn't even happened yet. I was just telling her about what it was going to be, where it was going to be, what the couple was like, and all this kind of stuff. And by the time the wedding finished and I sent her the gallery, she goes, thanks so much. But this year's issue for this national magazine, every year they do an issue that's about destination weddings, right? And this was a wedding in Greece and all this kind of stuff. And they were like, love it. This year's issue is just domestic. And it was an international wedding. It's like, it has nothing to do with my work. It's just whatever route that a gallery is going down. If they're trying to find an artist that jives with, they got to think about how they're
Right.
curating their stuff too.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was last I was like, okay, well, I remembered what was in that gallery, like in their shop where I was
Mhm.
trying to get my stuff in it. It all kind of jived.
Mhm.
My
Yep.
stuff didn't jive with shop, so it was like,
Yep.
okay, all right.
Have these relationships with galleries just now started, or like, are you getting your feet wet in them? Or because it's funny that I didn't even know this about you, and I was just having a conversation with somebody on Instagram who was like, "Hey, have you interviewed anybody on the podcast that's in galleries? Because that's what I'm trying to learn." And I was like, "No, actually, I haven't yet." And here we
Yeah,
are.
here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in four of them. Yeah.
All right.
Um, so you got to pay attention to the contracts and all that. I mean, they're going to get their cut, so that's a
Of course.
consideration.
Yep.
They're going to get their cut, because they're showcasing, they're advertising for you. That's a space for your work to be in, so that is a consideration. If you're not willing to give up all the way up to 50% of your profit, you might want to not go to the galleries, and you just got to pay attention to that. Or if you're trying to get your name out there, get more people to see your work than what you're capable of doing through your current marketing or whatever,
Yep.
then yeah, go for the galleries. I wouldn't necessarily recommend four, but but go for it. You just got to know what you're going into it for. Be honest with the gallery. Read the contracts. Make sure, because some of them you are exclusive to us, or
Mm.
the others are not. Um, I just ran into a situation with Nsika, like, hey, can't have too many of representing you in Nsika. So now it's like, okay, so I got to have that wiggle room with that one and just make sure, go back, read the contracts, make sure I'm not doing anything wrong,
Yep.
and putting myself in a bad position with the galleries as well. Because I'm just learning this space. 20 years soldier, and doing some artwork, and next thing you know, like this stuff is kind of, for me, it's happening faster than I could ever imagine it happening.
Mm.
Thoroughly enjoy it, but now it's kind of go back, schedule these things out, make sure you got everything lined up. Instead of assignments, now I'm scheduling work to send to galleries, and then working that out in the future for the rest of this year, next year, making a new plan, that timeline clocks. I don't know exactly when I'm walking away, but I do know, yeah, I'm on the backside. So
Yep.
it's like, okay, we gotta make this plan to walk away from the army and enter this art world full steam. Like I don't want any bumps, you know,
No
when I walk
sleeping.
out.
There will be no pause. There will be no
Nope,
vacation. It's just
nope.
gonna be wham,
You're like, I'll hang up the boots and lace on my studio shoes.
Crocs.
Put the Crocs on. Might even get a pair of camouflage Crocs. I don't
I was
know.
gonna say there is an Instagram post in my brain right now for those 2 pairs of shoes next to each other.
Yep, I'm doing it. I'm doing it.
Just tag me for the
I'm doing it.
But
Yep.
truly, though, talking about going back to just the galleries, because I think people get a little worked up about like and I hear this with wholesale too. And personally, I love wholesale clients. I would rather drop off 100 pieces to one person than package singular mugs 100 times.
Right.
But people get worked up because like they're in their minds, you're losing that percentage, right? And if they can sell that mug for, let's say, $100 and you're only getting 50 of it, you could sell it for 100 of your own on your own website. But for somebody in the position you're in right now, still having the full-time job, or even when you are full-time with art, that means it's not like you just get the full $100. Your time is being given up for you're then the only person in charge of the marketing, in charge of the packaging and the customer service and the selling. And if something goes wrong when a gallery sells a piece, you're not going to hear about it. That gallery person has to, the curator has to deal with that. And that's
Right.
worth something, right?
It is. I mean, like I said, you have to look at it like, okay. And again, like I'm coming from a perspective where, like I said, art isn't keeping my lights on every
Yeah.
day. A whole nother job is.
Yeah.
So not. I mean, when you look at it, like, hey, I just sent you 20 pieces. Let's say they're $100 a piece, and I got 50% of that back. Man, wow, that's that. Ouch. If you start figuring that in, but at the same time, hey, I didn't have to worry about it. I just packaged them, shipped them off. Uh, I'm still a member of this gallery. Great for my resume when I do walk away. That's also a huge perk. I could say, yeah, I'm actually, virtual resident artist in all these galleries because I do want to teach when I get out. That's the ultimate goal. And it helps me for that. I mean, hey, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. It makes me a bit more of an artist. Like I kind of know what I'm talking about in some aspects. I don't know everything. But I can show you how to put graphics on it though.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
so,
now you can center now
yeah,
mostly
yeah, I can center it,
on a good day.
I can glaze it, this, and that's it. You really just with the galleries you have to have a plan when you go. Like really just ask them, what are you doing it for?
Yeah.
Because I would argue that it's not initially to make a lot of money because you're going to have to build yourself up to that point going to gallery route unless you're just that 1% that's just going to be that the next coming. Oh, and then everybody just wants your stuff. You just gotta know it's going to be kind of a crawl, walk, run because you got to build your clientele up. And again, if that's what the gallery is doing for you, then yes, because I have friends who do sell in galleries and they're like, yeah, I send them some work at this price point. They come back and said, no, I'm doubling your price point and we're going to sell it that way.
Yeah.
So you got to look at it that way. Like if I told them $100 and I'm expecting to get 50 back and they said, no, we're selling it for 200 and I get 100 back, then I mean, that's a win, right? they're,
Exactly.
they're doing their job, you
Exactly.
know?
Yep.
So you got to pay for that.
And they've also already put in the time to create the market that will come to them to pay $200 for a mug, right? Like it takes
Exactly.
a lot of time, or it could take a lot of time to work up your own audience that is in that space.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, like I said, there's benefits. You just got to know what are you getting into it for.
Yep.
It's almost like I tell people when you join the army, you don't join the military to get rich. You're not going to get rich joining the military. That's not the reason why you do it. You will be taken care of. I love the life. I love the life. And I think that's kind of the same thing. You have to understand what you're going into these galleries for. It's a mutual relationship because you're also helping them stay in business because they're showing your art.
Yep.
They need you and you need them if you join that relationship.
Yep. Follow-up question to that. Has it mostly been you reaching out to galleries, or has some of it been them coming to you and seeing your work too?
The only gallery I ever reached out to was that one.
That said no.
The one that said no, and I didn't reach out to any others. Full disclosure,
That's
I did not.
awesome. That's fantastic.
But again, like I said, it's been a whirlwind kind of growth of D Goode Art, and I finally had to start saying no to galleries, because I'm still getting contacted by galleries, and
Darn.
I'm like,
Such a rough
and
life
opportunities,
still. Such a rough.
but and I hopefully that doesn't sound conceited, but it really was.
I can only make that joke because you're not being conceited at all. If everybody could see
You know,
your
20-year-old me would have been like, yeah, you're gonna have to wait in line, you know. But yeah, I'm in my 40s now. So it's like, no, 40-year-old me is like, hey, I can't overexert myself.
Yeah.
Because eventually I do want to sell. I want to put stuff back on my Etsy or maybe make up my own website, either or. Like I want to eventually get to do that. Because you can see it, they can't see it, but I got work stacking up behind me.
Yep. Yep.
So, I do eventually want to do that. I don't always want to sell out a gallery. So I gotta kind of, make that time for that. But a part of that, like I said, that time management is okay, I'm at my limit
Yeah.
for being able to do it. Because again, it's that relationship. They are expecting me to send a certain amount of work at a certain amount of time. So it's either cancel that relationship or make it happen. So it's like, hey, okay, I'm kind of at my limit right now with what I can do. Because I'm a small batch potter. That's the truth of it. I'm small batch. I can't really produce a lot. So that's on me to kind of go back to the galleries and be honest about what I can produce. Like, hey, you're asking for this. I can't give you that much.
Yeah.
Are you still willing to keep me on? And if they say no, okay, I'd be perfectly fine with that. All right, yeah, because I'm not meeting what you want from one of your artists. And we just, hey, cool, thank you for bringing me in. But yeah, so it's all about that balance. And luckily I was able to kind of catch it and be like, okay, this is it for me. So yeah, and then just learning how to say no without burning bridges and all that stuff. But I'm still very appreciative. Like it's still an honor anytime an organization reaches out and says, hey, we want to bring you in. That's part of what we have going on.
Yeah. Which I also imagine saying that no, at least for my brain, is really difficult because there's the little thought quirking in the back of the head of, will another one come around, right? And as somebody who does make a living from what she's producing, it's kind of like, will another opportunity come? If I say no, there can be those scary thoughts of, well, I have to say yes now because this is the season. This is, I have to do this because next month maybe we won't have this much work. And then you do burn out and then you've exhausted yourself and you're no good to anybody.
So one of the things I do every now and again, and I think it's just relationship building. So I'll still reach out to one of the galleries that I said no to and just thank them every now and again. Like, hey, you know what? I appreciate when you reached out
Yeah.
and said you wanted me to kind of display in your space. I was like, that was pretty awesome. It meant a lot to me. This is what, even though I said no, this is what at least the invitation meant to me. And I remind them that every now and again. And it's not to be like, hey, one day I might need to go show in there, but it's really still just saying like, hey, to me, that was a big deal. And I know they just don't do that to anybody. So I'll just let them know, yeah, I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
And it might come that day where like, hey, now I'm at a space where I'm, not working a job where I don't know when I'm going to be home, but now I can focus solely on ceramics. So yeah, now I can show
Yep.
in your space if you'll still have me.
From the outside looking in, it seems to me that galleries remind me a lot of how I've built my photography business, which is that relationship management in terms of the photography business for me is built on word of mouth. But everybody assumes when I say word of mouth that means other couples getting married referring me to their friends. And yes, that does happen, but the bulk of the work comes from venues that you hire and planners and all the other vendors. Because if you think about it, if you're at that time of life when you've got friends who are all getting married, that happens for a year or two. You go to 5 or 6 weddings and then maybe it's done for a while, or at least it slows down. Whereas a venue has 2, 3, 4 weddings every single weekend as far as the referrals. So maybe the piece that might not feel natural for people who are interested in getting into galleries is what it sounds like coming from you is that networking side of it, where you really have to be conscientious of your relationships with people, whether they say yes or no, it doesn't matter.
One of the best books, audiobooks, I don't read too much. I do the audiobook thing, in the studio
Yeah.
or driving around and stuff, was The War of Art
Oh,
by
yeah.
Stephen Pressfield.
Yep.
And so I'm listening to this book at the same time the D Goode Art transition, marketing, and all this stuff is happening, right?
Yeah.
And he talks about that rejection from galleries and museums, but he also talks about how to foster that relationship after you've been rejected. Like, why not reach out to a curator and just be like, hey, can we do a video chat? Like, I just want like 15 minutes, just kind of talk, give me some tips and tricks. Like you said no, but okay, what do I need to do at least with my style or maybe take them out to lunch or something. Just different things to kind of be like, just foster that relationship. Like seriously, just foster it.
Yep.
That book, I did a lot of things after that book, like crazy, like I'm just going to do an art show. Just never curated an art show, never done an art show. And I walked into the Army Aviation Museum and I was like, hey, I want to do an art show here. And they were like, nobody's ever done an art show here. I'm like, okay,
Is that a no
can I
or is
do an
that a
art?
yes?
Yeah, can I do an art show here?
And they said
You
yes,
know?
I'm
And they
assuming.
were like, and I was like, you know what? I'll even do all the work. I'll do the advertisement. I'll do all the graphic design. I'll do all that stuff.
Yep.
Just give me the space. And I did that several times, just out of I always tell people, you'll never win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket. So they're
Yep.
just not going to give you the money.
Yep.
They're just not going to let you have an art show if they don't know you want an art show. So, I just started finding crazy spaces and it worked. He gave examples of how it worked in his book. And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to go try it. Hey, I want to do an art show here. I got like 3 art shows under my belt that I've curated. It's pretty crazy.
I mean, you're also making your own opportunities, right? You're not
Exactly.
just because I think some of the times what can feel exhausting for people is you're grinding away in your studio or wherever it is you're doing your work. If you're by yourself and you're grinding away and you're trying to create something amazing, and then you're opening up your phone and you're scrolling through and you're seeing from the outside perspective all these people on the internet winning at life,
Mm.
when really you don't see the fact that you went out and created that for yourself. It's not like somebody rolled around and said like, "Oh, hey, master potter soldier, come do an art show in the aviation museum."
Yeah, that would have never happened.
Right.
And I was wearing cargo shorts and a t-shirt and I think some flip-flops. And
Okay, I'm gonna cut that part out because nobody should be encouraged to wear cargo shorts. I'm just saying.
what?
Only a soldier gets away with wearing cargo shorts.
Oh
Or a
man, yeah, cut
15-year-old skinny white boy in the Midwest. Those are the 2 options, and the only 2 options.
but that shows you how, as long as you're confident in what you want to say, it don't matter what you're wearing.
That's
And
true.
literally they just kind of looked at me and was like, okay,
Yeah.
let's do it. So yeah. So like I said, just listening to that and just kind of implementing some of those things. Like, yeah, it does work to just go. And those are the curators I talked to of the museum. I'm like, hey, I want to do this. And they're like, cool. So and hey, dude, why not try these things? What do you have to lose?
Exactly.
Rejection, right? Okay, well, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
You'll be okay. You'll be all right.
I don't think there's ever a story of anyone, and if we reference any of them, it's just gonna sound trite, and people are gonna be like, "Oh, yeah, I heard it a million times." But think of all the greatest people in any genre, right? Think of like the really obvious one everybody's heard a million times. Michael Jordan didn't get on his basketball team the first
Yeah.
time. Nobody can envision that, but the first time out doesn't always work, and you've got to keep it's definitely having to grow that thick skin to keep yourself in the game is a learning curve too.
I like to tell people like too when they're like, "Hey, can you teach me how to do this?" I tell, well, I was like, "Well, I can't teach you anything until you believe in your own level of dopeness.
Mm,
If you don't understand how dope you are on the inside from the start, it makes it really hard for me to teach you going forward." I joke about it, but it's really like you got to believe in yourself at all times. You have to believe
yeah.
in what you're doing. And I used to tell people, all you got to do is impress one person with your art. Just impress one person. That one person might be you. Impress one person with your art. And then if somebody else sees it and you impress that second person with your art, okay, you've made a successful piece at that point, and just keep going from there. And you never know.
I feel like that's the perfect mic drop moment. I'm like, I don't want to segue from that. I'm just gonna that's done. Finished.
All right. Well, this has
Uh,
been great. Um,
I also know you've got little kids coming home, so this is perfect. I don't know if this is just like dad instinct, perfect timing. Like, let me just drop this wisdom nugget and then boop, bye.
I think that's what it was. That's what it was.
It's fabulous. All right. Well, all of this amazing graphics, color, where can people find you and come see what you're doing on the internet?
On Instagram at D Goode Art. That's where I put it all. There's a link in my bio that takes you to everything else. That's the best spot. Just go to the grams, and then from there, just have a blast.
And I will do a direct link to that in the show notes so people can just click on it because more often than not, I think everybody's listening to us with mud on their hands. So
Right. Right. As
we're
I do to this podcast myself.
I
So
love it. I love it so much. Thank you so much for taking the time late on a
thank you,
Friday.
Rebecca. This is
Pleasure.
great. This has been great.
Awesome. And that wraps up episode 302 here on the Maker's Playbook podcast. If you love this episode, it would seriously mean the world to me if you went into whatever podcast app you're listening to and left a review. It probably doesn't seem like a big deal on your side of the earbuds, but it is a huge deal for me. It's particularly a huge deal right now because I'm going to let you in on a really big, slightly anxiety inducing goal I have for this year of the podcast. So lean in because it feels like something I need to whisper. I am looking for an awesome corporate partnership with a socially conscious business to help us better navigate some of the costs associated with producing this podcast. Because obviously, I love this podcast. I love doing it. I love the conversations. I love all of your messages. But it can't stay a passion project forever because there's a lot of work to do. So, your lovely reviews help us show to other businesses what an impact this podcast has within the makers community and why it would be so savvy for them to partner with me. This is an obvious place for a segue to tell you that if you know of someone who works at an art supplier like Laguna Clay or Clay Kings or Dirty Girls, Shimpo, you get the idea. It's a long list. If you have a person you buy your stuff from every time and you email with them or you chat with them, anything like that, tell them how much you love the podcast. If you're feeling really ambitious with me today, maybe consider a little email intro between them and yours truly. Remember, my email is podcast@makers-playbook.com. That would be super magical and crazy helpful. But first things first, wipe the mud off your hands, click into that podcast player app of yours, and leave a review. Thank you so much in advance. All right, until next week, go get back to making your dreams a reality because together, we've got this.